Hi guys, I'm back with another Genshin Impact video, and today we're going over an updated DPS Keqing guide because a few people in the comments requested for it, and I thought this would be a fun video to make as well. This video will be a bit longer than usual as Keqing has two different playstyles, and I'll try to cover both as best I can. Be sure to use the timestamps in the description below to navigate the guide more easily. So, Keqing is a super fun and versatile DPS. Honestly, she's not the strongest, and that's mostly because electro as an element is in a weird spot and kind of holding Keqing back, but I still think that Keqing is super viable to play, and you can even use her for harder content such as Spiral Abyss. In this guide, I'll be going over some tips as well as recommended weapons, artifacts, team comps, and more to build Keqing as your main DPS. So, for general tips, I think one of the most important things to learn about Keqing is managing her stamina consumption. I know a lot of people think and say just use charge attacks on Keqing, and yes, spamming her charge attacks is pretty strong, but when you use Keqing in harder content such as Spiral Abyss, you'll find out you'll run out of stamina a lot of times. So one thing you could do to manage this is by using normal attacks while waiting for your stamina to recharge and then using your charge attack. A common attack pattern is using 4 normal attacks and then using your charge attack. However, you can mix things up if you'd like and do, for instance, 2 normal attacks and then a charge attack, or even 3 normal attacks and then a charge attack. Another tip I have for Keqing is for her electro build. To keep electro applied on an enemy as long as possible, I find it very helpful to cast your elemental skill first, and then use your burst, and then use your elemental skill again. This is so you can keep electro applied on an enemy as long as possible, and it's very helpful if you're using a set such as 4-piece Thunder Soother on Keqing. For a physical Keqing build, one tip that I have, and it may seem like an obvious tip, but I still think that it can be helpful for newer players who might not know this. For Keqing, if you cast your elemental skill, you can remotely create an AoE electro attack by charge attacking. This is a way to apply electro for super conduct while keeping your normal attacks and charge attacks physical. So enough tips, now on to weapons. The best recommended weapons for Keqing differ depending on what playstyle you want to use for her. I'll be starting with electro builds first, and if you're aiming for an electro Keqing, the only decent free-to-play option for her is the Blackcliff Longsword, which you can get by exchanging Star Glitter at the Paimon shop. You get crit damage as a secondary stat, which is always very helpful, so you can run a crit rate circlet, and the passive is okay against many enemies, but not so good against bosses. However, if you have enough Star Glitter and are free to play, the Blackcliff Longsword is a decent option for electro Keqing, and you could also potentially run this for a physical build on her as well. One great option from the gacha is the Lion's Roar. This weapon gives attack percent as a secondary stat, and the passive increases damage against enemies affected by electro by 20%. Also, keep in mind that the passive gets stronger at high refinements. Overall, the Lion's Roar is a good option for electro Keqing if you can't afford the Battle Pass weapon and don't have a 5-star sword. Another viable gacha option for an electro Keqing is the Flute. You get attack percent as a secondary stat, and the passive is pretty good too. Overall, this is a decent option for electro Keqing and even physical Keqing if you don't have another weapon or a 5-star sword. One of Electro Keqing's best 4-star weapons is definitely the Black Sword from the Battle Pass. You get crit rate as a secondary stat, which is always super helpful, and the passive is great too, especially at high refinements. If you're able to afford the Battle Pass, I'd say it's really worth picking up the Black Sword if you're planning to build Electro Keqing, or even main Keqing in general. For 5-star weapons, for Electro Keqing, her best in slot is the Primordial Jade Cutter. This weapon gives a high base attack and has crit rate as the secondary stat. Also, the passive is pretty good too. If you have the Jade Cutter, congrats! If not, that's okay too. There's other 5-star swords that are still very viable for Keqing, specifically the Aquila Favonia. Although the Aquila gives physical damage bonus as a secondary stat, the weapon still has a very high base attack and very good passive, which increases your attack by 20%. I still think that it's a great weapon to use for electro Keqing if you don't have another 5-star sword. For physical Keqing, the best weapons for her are a bit different. For free-to-play, you're in luck, as the Prototype Ranker is a phenomenal weapon for physical Keqing. You get physical damage bonus as a secondary stat, and the passive generally is very good for Keqing as well. For gacha weapons, the flute is once again a viable option for physical Keqing, as the attack percent secondary stat and passive is pretty helpful. Overall, it's a decent weapon to use if you're using the prototype ranker on another character. The Battle Pass weapon, the Black Sword, is also a good option for physical Keqing, as you get, once again, crit rate as a secondary stat, and the passive is super good, especially at high refinements. If you already have the Black Sword and you want to build physical Keqing, I'd say definitely use it, but if you don't have this weapon or can't afford the Battle Pass, remember that the prototype ranker is still a fantastic free-to-play option for physical Keqing. For 5-star weapons, one of the best 5-star swords for physical Keqing is the Primordial Jade Cutter, as this weapon has a high base attack and gives crit rate as a secondary stat. Also, the passive is pretty good too. If you don't have the Jade Cutter, the Aquila Favonia is also a fantastic 5-star sword for physical Keqing, as the Aquila gives physical damage bonus as a secondary stat, and the weapon also has a pretty high base attack and very good passive, which increases your attack by 20%. Enough about weapons, now it's time for the toughest part of building any character, and that's artifacts. For Keqing, because she's so versatile, there are two main playstyles that you could use for her, and that's either her physical build or her electro build. For electro Keqing, one of the most balanced ways to build her is by using 2-piece Gladiator's Finale and then 2-piece Thundering Fury. You get 18% attack from the 2-piece Glad set, and then 15% electro damage bonus from the 2-piece Fury set. Overall, this build is much easier to farm for, as you only need 2-piece sets rather than a full 4-piece set. Another way to build an electro Keqing is by using 4-piece Thunder Soother set. This is a great set to use if you're using a weapon such as the Lion's Roar. Also, from the 4-piece set, you get 35% increased damage when opponents are affected by electro, and overall, this is a good set to use if you're really vying for a strong electro Keqing build. For physical Keqing, one way to build her is by using 2-piece Gladiator's Finale and 2-piece Bloodstained Chivalry. You get 25% physical damage bonus from the 2-piece Bloodstain set, and then 18% attack from the 2-piece Glad set. This is a viable way to build physical Keqing and a bit easier to build for, as you only need 2-piece sets rather than a full 4-piece set. Another viable build for physical Keqing is running her with a 4-piece Retracing Bolide set. When you're protected by a shield, you get 40% increase in damage to your normal attacks as well as charge attacks, and overall, this is a good set to use if you're really vying for Keqing's auto attacks to be strong. One last build that I'll be talking about for physical Keqing is the 4-piece Pale Flame set. Although this set is not in the game yet as of making this video, but from the teasers and the previews from 1.5, it does seem to be a pretty good artifact set for physical Keqing, as you get 25% physical damage bonus from the 2-piece effect, and the 4-piece effect seems pretty good as well. However, since this set is not in the game yet, we'll just have to wait and see how the set will be like for physical Keqing. So, for main stats, for electro Keqing, the recommended main stats are attack percent on the sands, electro damage bonus on the goblet, and crit rate or crit damage on the circlet, depending on what you need more. For physical Keqing, the recommended main stats are attack percent on the sands, physical damage bonus on the goblet, and crit rate or crit damage on the circlet. The best substats for electro and physical Keqing are the same, and in order of priority are crit rate or crit damage, attack percent, and flat attack. Crit rate and crit damage speak for itself. Attack percent and flat attack are very good for Keqing, as Keqing's normal attack, charge attack, elemental skill, and burst all scale off of attack. Okay, substats for Keqing are energy recharge and then elemental mastery. Energy recharge is only okay on Keqing and not necessary for her, as her burst costs only 40 particles. This means that she gets her burst back pretty quickly. Elemental Mastery, on the other hand, is not that good on Keqing, as Electro as an element is not that strong in terms of reactions, and for physical Keqing, she does not really benefit from Elemental Mastery. The avoid at all cost substats, and I feel I'll say this a lot, are HP percent, defense percent, flat HP, and flat defense. Once again, it's very difficult to try to avoid these substats in artifact farming because artifact farming is just super painful, but as much as possible, try to avoid these substats. For talent level priorities, generally you want to get every talent of Keqing's at 6 and then decide from there which talent to use her weekly boss materials on. For both an electro and physical build on Keqing, the talent level priorities for her are the same. I recommend leveling your normal attack first, and then your burst, and then your elemental skill. This is because Keqing's normal and charge attacks make up most of her damage, and her burst is very useful for both her physical and electro builds. For her physical build, it helps to give you invincibility frames and get out of sticky situations, and for her electro build, it helps you apply more electro on enemies. Pretty useful if you're using a 4-piece Thunder Soother set, for instance. Also, Keqing's elemental skill is not the biggest priority to level up, so it can be left to level up last. For constellations, and this is especially true for physical Keqing, none of her constellations really benefit her physical build, so if you get one, I'm really sorry. However, for her electro build, her constellations definitely do make her stronger, but are not necessary for her at all. She is perfectly fine at C0. Now on to team comps. I'll be going over a few free-to-play friendly as well as not so free-to-play friendly team comps for both of Keqing's playstyles. For a free-to-play Electro build on Keqing, I have Keqing as main DPS, Xingqiu as sub DPS, Fischl as support, and Barbara as healer. This is an Electro charge team that is really fun to play and helps to keep Electro applied on enemies as much as possible. Xingqiu is a great sub DPS because of his elemental skill and burst. Fischl provides electro resonance for Keqing to get many particles for her burst, and helps to support Keqing off-field with Oz. And Barbara helps to heal the team, as well as buff Keqing if you're running Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers on her. Overall, this is a very good team comp if you're considering using a 4-piece Thunder Soother set for Keqing. Another free-to-play team which you could run for Keqing is an Overload team. I have Keqing as main DPS, Shanling as sub DPS, Sucrose as support, and Bennett as healer. Shanling provides off-field support with her skill and burst, Sucrose helps round up enemies, and Bennett helps to heal, as well as provides buffs for Keqing and gives the 25% attack boost that Pyro Resonance provides. Overall, this team is a bit tricky to run against small enemies, as Overload makes enemies spread out, but this team is viable to use against bosses and elite mobs, such as those in Floor 12 of Spiral Abyss. Another free-to-play team for Keqing is a double Electro team that relies on Electro charge reactions as well as Bennett buffs. This team has Keqing as main DPS, Beidou as sub DPS, Xingqiu as support, and Bennett as healer. Beidou helps to provide off-field support with her burst, Xingqiu can help deal a ton of damage with his skill and burst, and Bennett is once again a very good support that helps to buff Keqing. Overall, this team is very fun to play and synergizes pretty well together. For not so free to play friendly teams for an Electro Keqing build, I have Keqing as main DPS, Shanling as sub DPS, Venti as support, and Bennett as healer. This team is similar to the Overload team that I've mentioned before, but this time we sub out Sucrose for Venti to reliably group enemies together and make Overload be more useful without making enemies spread out after exploding. You receive the same buffs that Shanling and Bennett both provide, specifically the Pyro Resonance and Bennett's buffs, and overall this is a solid team to use against both small enemies and boss situations. Another not so free to play friendly team comp I have is Keqing as main DPS, Zhongli as support, Albedo as sub DPS, and Bennett as healer. This is a double Geo team that helps to protect Keqing with shields while also providing tons of additional damage. Zhongli provides crowd control with his burst and lowers the elemental resistance of opponents with his consistent shields. Albedo helps to provide additional damage with his elemental skill, and Bennett is again broken as a support and helps to buff Keqing a lot with his burst. This is a viable team to run for a hyper carry Keqing that's out on the field dealing as much damage as possible. So now on to physical team comps. For a free-to-play physical Keqing team, I recommend running Keqing as main DPS, Kaya as sub DPS, Fischl as support, and Diona as healer. Kaya helps to deal damage and apply cryo for consistent superconduct with his skill and burst. Fischl provides off-field support by using Oz and gives particles for Keqing, and Diona helps to apply cryo for superconduct as well as provide shields and heals for Keqing. Overall, this is a team that relies on superconduct reactions that helps to lower the physical resistance of enemies as much as possible. Another team you could potentially run for physical Keqing is Keqing as main DPS, Rosaria as sub DPS, Kaya as support, and Barbara as healer. This is a double cryo team that's there to provide superconduct reactions for Keqing, as Rosaria helps to apply cryo with her elemental skill and burst. Kaya acts as support and also provides off-field cryo application from his burst, and Barbara helps to heal, as well as provide an attack boost if you use Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers on her. Overall, this is a viable team comp to run for physical Keqing that's not that difficult to play. For a not so free to play physical Keqing team, I have Keqing as main DPS, Ganyu as sub DPS, Fischl as support, and Diona as healer. This is a double electro cryo team that helps to again provide consistent superconduct reactions for physical Keqing. Ganyu provides consistent cryo application from her burst, as well as a good amount of damage too as sub DPS. Fischl provides off-field support with Oz, and Diona heals, as well as provides shields and cryo application from her elemental skill. One last not so free to play friendly physical Keqing team I have is Keqing as main DPS, Zhongli as sub DPS, Albedo as support, and Qiqi as healer. This is personally my comp that I use for Keqing, as you benefit from the buffs Geo Resonance provides. Also, Zhongli provides crowd control with his burst and gives consistent shields, as well as lowers the physical resistance of enemies by 20%. Albedo provides off-field support with his elemental skill, and Qiqi provides heals, as well as cryo application from her elemental skill. Overall, this is a great team that helps Keqing deal a lot of damage, and good to use if you're considering a 4-piece retracing bow light set for her. And that's it for this video. Honestly, this guide was much longer than I thought it was going to be, but I wanted to be thorough because Keqing is one of my favorite waifus. I hope this guide was useful to you though, if you're considering building Keqing. And yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching and for all of the support for the channel. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!